Jimmy Butler is confident championship is in Miami's future. We break down what he had to say about his time in Miami. And if Damian Lillard does join Miami, will he fit as well with Jimmy and Bam Adebayo as Miami's former Big Three? We debate that and more on today's episode of Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. I'm Wes Goldberg here, as always, with David Ramil. However you're tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or your favorite podcast app, thanks so much for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Great show for you today. We've got a question comparing a Damian Lillard Big Three versus the LeBron, Dwyane Wade, Chris Bosh Big Three. Omer Yurtseven is gone. Joel Embiid is making headlines, and we have a Damian Lillard update. All of that later in today's show, but I want to start with Jimmy Butler, who has made it a habit to make bold championship predictions nearly every time he gets near a microphone. He did it most recently in an interview during his Leaning tour in China, saying that he thinks this is the Heat's year to win a championship. I'm going to tell you what makes this time a little bit different, but first, here's the sound courtesy of Chinese Baller Vision.
I believe that with all my heart that I will win a championship for the Miami Heat, because I don't plan on playing for another NBA team after the Miami Heat. So I know that we are capable of doing this. I know that the team that Coach Pat and Coach Bo put around me and my teammates, we're going to be fine. We're always going to have an opportunity. This year is our year. I really do believe that. We understand what it takes to get there, and now we just have to get over that hump. And like I said, I'll be better. We'll all be better as a unit. And then the next time I'm talking to y'all here, I'll be a one-time NBA champion.
So a few things to get to from that soundbite, David, but I do want to start with just something that we've talked about on this program a few times is what Jimmy Butler is actually doing when he's making these championship predictions. And it's less about trying to be right in making a prediction. It's less Joe Namath-y. And it's more in just trying to imbue confidence in his teammates. And that's why he makes a championship proclamation basically every post-game during the NBA playoffs. But we're not in the NBA playoffs right now. We're in the offseason. And he doesn't even know whose teammates are going to be next year, right? This Damian Lillard thing is still hanging in the air. Gabe Vincent and Max Strus are gone. This has nothing to do with imbuing confidence in his teammates. So this is a little bit different than the championship proclamations that he made in the past. If anything, this is more, I think, signaling to the organization that he has confidence in them. And he even names Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra and says, I have confidence in the team that they're going to put around me and the coaching and all of that stuff. And so I think it's different in that way. And I know a lot of people could roll their eyes at this and just be like, all right, here he goes again, another championship proclamation, another prediction. Like at some point, and look, I think it's understandable to say like, hey, you know what, actually win one, and then we'll start taking this stuff seriously. But I got to tell you, man, like we're going to get to the Joel Embiid stuff here in a minute. And, you know, I actually kind of find it a little refreshing out of the stars. I don't roll my eyes at this stuff because you've got stars across the league just giving up on organizations, giving up on teammates at the first moment of not winning in the conference finals, not winning in the NBA finals, not winning the championship that they want, not getting the ring and the rings culture that is so prevalent and so dominant in today's conversation, that you've got somebody like Jimmy Butler who's out here saying, no, we're going to get the next one. Don't worry about it. No, this is our year. I got it. Instead of, hey, you know what? Maybe I hope I can win one. I hope I just get a chance, whether it's in Philadelphia or somewhere else, or even Kevin Durant. And I don't even mean this as a slight to Kevin Durant necessarily, because he's one of the greatest players of his generation, of all time. But even him kind of getting sad and moving on over and over again. James Harden kind of throwing up his hands and finding new teams over and over again. Kyrie Irving, like the list goes on. And Jimmy Butler, and he wasn't always this way, right, in Minnesota and things like that, but he's found a home in Miami where he feels comfortable and trusting. And I don't know that there is another star in today's NBA that trusts his teammates and the organization that he plays for the way that Jimmy Butler does. And I find it refreshing, and I don't roll my eyes at it, David.
I am a little surprised to hear your perspective on this be so not optimistic, but like I'm not even sure the exact word escapes me right now, but that you're seeing like the purity of what Jimmy's saying and you're taking it at face value. Normally you have a much more cynical perspective on what players have to say, especially when they do it on a shoe endorsement tour like this. And in fact, to the point where I feel kind of embarrassed to admit, I didn't even read it that way. Like I was hearing his comments about not wanting to play for another team, and perhaps I'm a little jaded, but we see the landscape of today's NBA. We've seen Jimmy over the course of his career, and yes, this is the second longest stint with any one team that he's had during his NBA career, but it could all just as easily change tomorrow. I had not looked at that clip and heard what he had to say and said, and viewed it the way that you did as confirmation of how much he loves Miami and he doesn't want to go anywhere. Because even last year, on this show and with other guests that we've had on the show, we debated whether it might be a time for Miami to reset and trade Jimmy Butler. Of course, that was well before the postseason and everything else like that, but it is a topic. Heat fans certainly engaged in that kind of level of conversation, say, oh, we're not going anywhere. Do Jimmy a solid, trade him to a contending team.
I'll admit it. I came on the show multiple times and said the Heat might have to explore it. And if it was a first round out against Milwaukee, or if they didn't come back in the fourth quarter against Chicago, I think that they would have. But that's not up to Jimmy Butler necessarily. Like whether I'm not that interested in whether or not he's going to be correct in his prediction saying that I only want to play for the Miami Heat. Like that's not necessarily only in his control. Obviously, the Heat have some control over that. That to me,
sure, it's
not interesting about whether he's right, but it is interesting to me that he does have that belief. That's to me what strikes me as interesting in this clip.
Yeah, I hadn't read that, so I might have to kind of think about it, soak it all in. And
what was your first reaction then?
Just the what you kind of hinted at. I did take it as him just being somebody who is so attuned to visualization and making sure that he sees himself. Like I am 100% certain that Jimmy has had hours spent imagining himself with a ring on his finger and a parade going down Biscayne Bay, because that's the only way that he can live his life. Like he has
a self-fulfilling prophecy type deal.
Yeah, like that you actually see it, like the joy in his face, wearing the sunglasses with the hat on backwards, throwing champagne on fans lining Biscayne Boulevard, half drunk as you make your way to the stadium, to the podium at FTX Arena or whatever it's called now, Kaseya Center. Sorry, I forgot there. I think he is really a big proponent of that sort of thing, because it's necessary.
I think that's part of it
at this point.
For sure.
Yeah.
I mean, it's like a golfer. You have to envision, you have to visualize. All right, I'm going to get this 3 feet from the hole, and then you go out and you try to do it.
Because he has sounded confident, as you said, like he sounded confident in the bubble. And I've told you before how he had talked throughout that whole season and kind of getting everybody in his first year in Miami, talking everybody up. And that's how we're going to win a championship. And that's why we're going to win a championship. And he keeps putting it out there and then stupidly locked in the next season, right? And of course, they wound up getting swept. And then we've seen what happens in the last couple of years when he says, I feel confident. I know that we're good enough. I know that our team is going to win a championship. And ultimately, unfortunately, winds up falling short. So that's how I saw it. When I saw Jimmy doing that, he's like, you know what? Kudos to him. He still believes in himself, and he's still making sure that everybody on that team believes in themselves.
Right.
This is going to be for guys like Thomas Bryant and Josh Richardson, who are just joining the team, and whoever else might be acquired over the next couple of months, and even the two-way guys. Like those young players are going to get a taste of this for the first time. I would be so encouraged to be on a team with a guy like Jimmy Butler, especially with all the kind of BS over the few years before he joined Miami and him being perceived as a locker room cancer and everything else like that. For him to talk so confidently about the organization as the leader of this organization, I would want to play here. Like we talk all the time about who wants to play with certain stars. Jimmy Butler is as close as you can get as to the kind of star that any other player around the league should want to play with. Yes, they have to make sacrifices, and yes, they have to put in the work. That's what makes you successful here in Miami. But having said all that, if you're looking for a good teammate who's willing to do whatever it takes to win, and again, puts it out there, says it with confidence, Jimmy Butler is tops in the league in that regard.
And you mentioned before that you were sort of shocked by my response to it, and I think part of it is the context and everything. It's on the heels of what Jimmy Butler or Joel Embiid was just saying, and the stars moving around and everything. And it just seems like so many of these stars are so sad all the time, and just
it's unfulfilling. It's unfulfilling.
I suppose if you're not, I understand there's a lot of pressure behind it, and I get it. But if you're not winning championships, it just feels like it's so quick to point the finger find somebody else to blame, whether it's an organization. And I do think that that's an unintended consequence and side effect of player empowerment. So much of player empowerment is a little bit of player entitlement. I think that's certainly part of it, where you're like, well, I'm this great and I ought to win. I am this great, so I should have a chance to compete for a championship, where no player is so great that by themselves they can win a championship. That doesn't exist. And you need teammates, you need an organization, you need to have trust in those institutions and in those teammates in order for you to try to get your own selfish goals, if your goals are to win a championship. And so I find it refreshing that somebody like Jimmy Butler is that way, right? And it has not always been that way. Has been the opposite of that. He was certainly the opposite of that in Minnesota. And we could debate whether or not it was like the Timberwolves deserved it, but like he stormed his way out of there and pointed fingers. He wasn't always this way.
What was missing in Minnesota that is not missing in Miami?
I'm not Philadelphia. I am not disagreeing with you on that. I'm just saying that that's what he did that. He did do that, and he does not do those things anymore. And I actually think if you go around the league, that stars can learn from Jimmy Butler. Like I find it, again, refreshing, because this is not an anti-player empowerment thing, David, but I just like the disposition of the players, the sadness that is so pervasive among these star players is not fun for fans. There's no way it could be fun. When all your star players are sad all the time and upset all the time, that can't be fun for fans. And so I think if you have somebody like Jimmy Butler, who's imbuing confidence and joy and all these things all the time, like I look at a guy like Kevin Durant, one of the 12 greatest players of all time. He can learn something from Jimmy Butler. Joel Embiid can learn something from Jimmy Butler. Like, these guys can learn something from Jimmy Butler and say, you know what, instead of trying to get my way out of this team every other year, maybe I can actually trust my organization and say things like, I trust Pat Riley and Eric Spoelstra. When was the last time you heard a star player seriously say that on a public platform? Like, it's been a while, man.
I don't think, maybe LeBron, and just one of those overarching kind of large conversations he has, like maybe he might shout out Rob Pelinka, but even then, like, I can't.
It doesn't
really
feel the
picture.
same. It doesn't feel the same. It's like, I trust Rob Pelinka to listen to what I'm saying as the general manager.
Right. Like, Rob put a good team together based on my recommendations.
Under my watch. Yes.
Yeah, right. Exactly. So yeah, that is exactly right. It is interesting. You don't see a lot of superstar players laud the front offices for the moves they make and the cultural integrity and everything else. And that's what makes Miami so unique. Like, I know a lot of fans will take it and kind of dismiss it and roll their eyes, as you said earlier, but the internal belief and everything else like that, I think it really is a strong one that makes it just one of a kind around the NBA.
Steph maybe was probably the last guy, and that's not even really been the case over the last couple of years, where it's
Myers isn't there anymore, right?
It's been and he voiced frustrations with the 2 timeline plan, which according to Joe Lacob was never actually planned, which is Joe Lacob lying, but whatever. And then Tim Duncan might be the answer. Like, the last time we really heard something like player, and Tim Duncan did not get on microphones and make bold claims all the time, but he was always very trusting of Greg Popovich and RC Buford and everybody there. I don't know. Like, it's, again, I don't want this to be just seen as me drinking the Kool-Aid of Jimmy Butler and stuff like that. And I don't even know, like, even if 65% of this is authentic, like, it's at least 65% more than what these other stars are doing. Maybe I'm being naive here and childish.
I wonder what the question was. What was the question that led to Jimmy?
That's true, because it was all in Chinese like symbols, like even the subtitles, the video that I saw. So I have no idea what, like, obviously the question was asked in Chinese and then they cut out whatever the translation part of it was. They edited that out. So I don't really know what it is, but it's a good call out. Like, if the question was, hey, Jimmy, do you think you're going to win the championship this year? And like, if that was, but again, like, he went at length about like the belief in the organization, all that stuff. Like, he could have just been like, yeah, I'm that good. We can always win a championship when I'm on the team. Like, he could have just said that, but he didn't.
I would have loved it if it had been something completely off the wall, like the Austin translations, like, how do you feel about your time with Shakira? And instead he just goes into this whole
roll. Are you more of a spicy tuna roll kind of guy, or like, I don't know. I know that the team that Pat Riley puts around us is going to be good enough. All right, coming up, which is the better fitting big three, a potential Damian Lillard, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo trio, or the big three of LeBron, D. Wade, and Chris Bosh? We debate that next here on Locked On Heat.
Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Take your first swing on betting on Major League Baseball over at FanDuel and get 10 times your first bet amount in bonus bets up to $200. You want to make a wager over at FanDuel on the Miami Marlins? I mean, they're an amazing team. They've got the hearts of South Florida right now. They're a fun team, just like the Panthers, just like the Heat. These Marlins are going
4-game losing streak right now, but I think they're going to bounce back.
Hey.
I think they're going to bounce back. Tough loss the other night. We almost made it. A couple in the ninth.
Season. I mean, you're bound to lose a couple here and there. But anyway, just $20, and you can land up to $200 in bonus bets, win or lose. That's $200 you can spend betting everything from the money line to the over/under to who you think is going to hit the first home run on a night-to-night basis, all on an app that's safe, secure, and super easy to use. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. Who doesn't like that? There's no better place to bet on Major League Baseball than FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So sign up today and visit FanDuel.com/lockedon, and you get up to $200 in bonus bets at FanDuel.com/lockedon. FanDuel, official partner of Major League Baseball.
Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Everydayers, we're going to be ranking the sports stars in South Florida tomorrow, and I have a feeling it's going to be a heated debate. So make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube. There was no pun intended on that. Subscribe, YouTube, your favorite podcast app. At the risk of getting ahead of ourselves here, David, I wanted to compare a potential big three of Damian Lillard, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo to the big three of LeBron, D. Wade, and Chris Bosh. And if only just to try to illustrate what's at stake here, what it is that the Heat are trying to accomplish, there's no doubt, right, that LeBron, Wade, Bosh, that group is superior in talent. Nobody's debating that. LeBron, at the height of his powers, maybe the greatest player of all time, like uncomparable in talent versus a potential Lillard, Jimmy Butler, Bam Adebayo, as good as Bam, Jimmy, and Dame might be. But I do think that there's actually an argument to be made about which big three fits better, right? And I want to make it clear that we're not debating who's better in terms of talent and skill. We're debating the fits, the basketball fits on the court, because that was a big question about the big three. And I don't know that they ever really answered it completely, if I'm being honest. Like, obviously it worked. But in terms of, like Dwyane Wade became this amazing cutter off the ball. LeBron James ended up handling the ball a lot more. Chris Bosh became a floor spacer and defender and switchable five and all these things. They made it work, but they had to transform their games as in those 4 years in order to make it work. Where I think, and I'm interested with your perspective here, walking in day one, Damian Lillard, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo fit way better, miles better than LeBron, D. Wade, and Chris Bosh fit together when they first signed in Miami. What do you think?
I'm not 100% sure of that. I think it does make sense, but only just because you have Damian Lillard and his incredible three-point shooting, and that makes the difference. Yeah. Whereas, but at the time when the team formed, with the team in 2010, the three-point shot wasn't necessarily what it is today. It was pre-Steph, and so that being the case, it just wasn't the bulk of your basic NBA offense at that point in time. So it didn't matter that LeBron couldn't shoot, or that Dwyane couldn't shoot, or that Chris couldn't shoot. Like, none of them had to shoot from three-point range, and they still routinely put up 75 to 80 points a game between the three of them. It was about getting the rest of the team, the fringes, to improve along the same lines, to be more supportive of what they could do, especially if, for whatever reason, 2011 finals, LeBron James isn't LeBron Jamesian, then, you need somebody else to step up. So in terms of what those two teams are like, the big three in 2010 versus this big three, yes, I would say so. But then I have concerns about Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo playing more off ball, considering neither of them are legitimate three-point shooters. If Dame has the ball in his hands and he's going to look to score from the perimeter, he's going to have to dish it off to somebody. And then it's a matter of who creates that next level of offense. Who's going to be able to attack the ball? Is it going to be, can we see that Jimmy, like Dwyane, make that transformation to be more of an off-ball cutter? Because I think he has the potential. Certainly he's smart enough. He has done it. Doesn't have to. He's got the ball in his hands more often than not. But now that he's going to have to go through this evolution, it's going to be important. And that was, I mean, we're talking players in their primes when they formed in 2010, as opposed to being a little bit older. It's not to say that Jimmy's not in his prime, even though it's a little bit older in that regard, but he has to make some changes to his game in terms of how he adapts playing to Dame Lillard. And as far as Bam is concerned, I think being that he's younger and being what he's capable of doing, and not necessarily as being as aggressive as a rim roller as Jimmy, etc., he might have to take that Boschian step in his evolution as far as being able to space the floor. I know it's a tired comment, and I know a lot of people have argued it at length for years now, and he's tired of hearing it. But I would like to see him become a legitimate 35% shooter from three-point range. Yeah. And I know we might be a season or two away, but it seems like we've been saying that for a season or two before that. And I think that's just the next step there, is you're going to have to be able to have Dame on one end, move the ball, and then have Jimmy go off ball. And if he gets shut down for some reason, the defense collapses on him, it'd be nice to be able to spray it back out to an open Bam Adebayo in that sense of being able to space the floor. So that's my concern about fit. To answer the question overall, or I mean, you want to just jump into another?
No, I mean, let's keep. I think it's all really good points. I guess my thought process was when LeBron and D Wade joined forces, specifically those two guys, there was like a whole season of trying to figure out who was the number one, right? Yeah. And it took a full year, and that was part of the reason why things sort of faltered in the finals there. Right. As great as Dwyane Wade was in the 2011 finals, it's worth mentioning. I don't think that would be the case, just personality-wise. I think Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo would be more than happy to cede number one scoring option responsibilities to Damian Lillard. If you're telling me that Bam has to be moved into more of a Chris Bosh role as maybe a tertiary scorer as opposed to having to be the guy on a night-to-night basis, he would welcome that. And I think it would actually enhance the other better parts of his game. And I've said this before, other than scoring, Bam Adebayo is elite at his position at literally everything else. Everything else, like maybe with the exception of rebounding, but he's an amazing box out. He had the most box outs in the league last year, according to NBA's tracking stats. So even if he's not grabbing the rebounds, he's responsible for a lot of rebounds, and Miami's rebounding percentage as a team goes up, skyrockets when he's on the court. So I have him as elite in that category also, even if his raw numbers don't show it. So if you bring in a guy like Damian Lillard, who also does the one thing offensively that Jimmy and Bam don't, I think he's so much more complimentary to those guys than I think with LeBron and Dwyane Wade. They played on the same side. They both wanted to go left. They both wanted the ball in their hands, and it just took so long for them to figure it out. And by the way, when they figured it out, it was beautiful. It was perfect.
Oh, yeah.
Like, they figured it out. It was perfect. My argument here is, like, there's going to be less of the figuring it out part. I actually think that we all remember when that Break Three first got together, it was rocky. Eric Spoelstra's job was on the line, rumoredly, and all these things. And I don't think that would be the case at all. Like, if the Heat are able to get Damian Lillard, obviously depending on what all the trade entails, but like Dame, Jimmy, and Bam, I could see them just like blasting off to start the season, like a hot start to the season, because I think it would just be it just makes more sense, I think, intrinsically when they take the court.
Maybe, but we've seen all those players bring the ball up. Like Bam, during the playoffs, even there were stretches there where he was most effective when he was the initial ball handler, like getting everybody to their half.
Who do you think should be the lead ball handler in a Dame?
It's got to be Dame. It's got to be Dame. Like, that's the whole thing. It's like, because Dame is so good at being able to survey that space, and if what makes him so strong as a scorer is being able to say, "Oh, you're going to play off me from 30 feet out. That's okay. That's within my range, baby. I got this." So I mean, if he starts looking at that, so it's really going to a certain degree, and I don't mean to like dump water, or, cool everybody off here. And then the idea of it is, to your point, when it does click, but I still think it's going to take some time for it to click. It's going to be beautiful, but in the interim, there are going to be some sketchy moments there. I think it's going to be a little bit more difficult than we might assume. Eventually, I think the fit's going to be better than it was during the Big Three at its peak, but the difference is also three athletes in their prime. Like,
it is hard to sort of differentiate that, isn't it? Like, at the end of the day, LeBron is just LeBron. Like, yeah.
We've never seen anything like it. Like, Dwyane was still one of the best athletes in the NBA at that point.
2 years.
Chris, I mean, there were 3 top 10 players, and that was like inarguable at that point in time. There were 3. It was number 1, maybe number 3
in 2011. I was arguing it was the top 2 guys in the NBA in 2011.
Yeah, I mean, he
just didn't know how to play with each other yet. And then by 2012, Dwyane had already lost a little bit of his powers He was still
no
top
doubt.
10 by 2012, but then it kind of the knee acted up and it precipitously dropped from there. But I hear your concern. I'm not saying that they're going to walk in and just be perfect, like just clicking and also like all the stars that get together, there is always a feeling out period. I actually think Bam should be the guy running the offense a little bit more. I like the idea of him kind of like running dribble handoffs with Dame up high, 30 feet away from the basket, and like Jimmy Butler cutting off of that action and all that kind of stuff. Like that's how I see it. And as long as you put like two shooters, if it's Kevin Love and Josh Richardson or Caleb Martin and somebody else, Duncan Robinson, whoever's still on the roster, I don't know. Like if you've got those two shooters around those three guys, I think the fit is going to be perfect. I'm not concerned about the spacing because Dame is his gravitational pull is so strong. Like he's kind of like 2 3-point shooters out there. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's Steph Curry-esque. It's like a notch below whatever Steph is. So I don't know. I remain bullish on it. I know you do too. I know that's not what you're saying here, but it's I just think that when you're talking about a guy like Bam, his perfect basketball partner isn't Jimmy Butler. It's Damian Lillard, right? And I think it would actually be on Jimmy Butler to figure out where he fits more. And I think like we would see something like and look, if this trade actually happens, we're going to get to break down the X's and O's, but like just quickly, I think we would see Dame and Bam be paired up in rotations and then Jimmy getting to play with like plus bench units so that he could do all that isolation stuff on his own. I think that would be how Spo would frame it. But anyway, that's a whole other kind of conversation. But it was an interesting sort of thing to think about here. Shall we move on, or you got any other points on this one?
I don't know. The more I think about it, the more I just want it to happen, I guess.
There we go. I guess so. Joel Embiid made headlines with some recent comments about possibly leaving Philadelphia to chase championships. One of those headlines involves the Miami Heat. We'll talk about that next here on Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Every day, or tomorrow, we rank the biggest stars in sports in South Florida. So make sure that you're subscribed on YouTube and your favorite podcast app. Some news to get to before we get to a Dame update and Joel Embiid's recent comments. Omer Yurtseven signed a 2-year deal with the Utah Jazz. What are your impressions of his time with the Heat, David?
Unfulfilling, unfortunately. Like I just wish he had a great guy to talk to, great guy in the locker room, nice personality and everything else like that. You hope for nothing for the best for him. I'm not going to besmirch him. It's just unfortunate that injury robbed him of what could have been a very, very good season, not just to prove to the team, but also to the rest of the league that he was still a good player.
Damian Lillard update. It's that Dame time again.
No.
A trade out of Portland to have to lower your asking price and look elsewhere, and that's where Miami
a shorter version here.
This is a shorter version.
This is supposed to be a peaceful separation.
Dame has every right to ask.
Cut it down by like 25 seconds.
The notion that they're going to have to give him away for nothing is just stupid.
I stand with Damian Lillard on that. I ain't got no problems with it at all.
We in the business call it incremental reporting.
It will hang over the whole summer.
That's shorter. Shams Charania of The Athletic reports that it's up to the Blazers and Heat to engage in negotiations at this point, that Portland has told Miami, make your best offer. Shams is told that the sides have spoken, but not about anything significant, and there is no real traction on any deal yet. So that's our Dame update.
What are they talking about if not something significant? Like it's all germane to the trade, right? Or unless they're asking Joe Cronin how his kids are or something like that. Like what's going on there? Like
the sides have spoken, I guess, past tense, but not about anything significant. That's true. It is a little gray there. Yeah.
They talked and were like, "Oh, hey, how's your time in Vegas?"
So part of the
did you try the buffet?
Part of the Dame time soundbite that you claim is too long. One of the things I wanted to keep in there and shortening it was Brian Windhorst saying incremental reporting, and incremental reporting is a broad term. You're just in today's just sports media landscape, even kind of political landscape, but that's a different podcast. You kind of look at it. It's not all breaking news. It's not all, there is no trade and now the trade has happened. There's a lot of stuff that goes on in between that. And a lot of that stuff is reported on because that is sort of the appetite that reporters like Shams and Woj and Windhorst are trying to serve. And so I always think about it as like a screw, and you got a screwdriver, and just every once in a while you're just turning that screw incrementally a little bit more to the right to tighten it up a little bit more. And that's sort of what each of these reports is attempting to do. This one is like barely doing that, isn't it? Like this one is just like, it's just not a whole lot there. Anyway, let's talk about Joel Embiid, who told uninterrupted CEO Maverick Carter during a recent panel appearance that, quote, "I just want to win a championship, whatever it takes. I don't know where that's going to be, whether it's in Philly or anywhere else. I just want to have a chance to accomplish that." He later tried to backtrack and responded to a tweet saying to check his middle name, which on Twitter, as we know, is Troll. So now the league is buzzing with speculation that Embiid could be the next star to be traded. And The Athletic recently had a headline, "Is Joel Embiid within the Heat's reach?" and proposed a swap for Bam Adebayo. David, I don't even know how to react or what question to ask you here. So I'm just going to ask, what do you think about all this?
I think it's ridiculous. Like, I'm sure he's going to ask out of Philadelphia at some point, and I don't blame him at all. They just haven't been able to form a team around him. Like to our point in the first segment, it's refreshing to see Jimmy Butler so encouraged by what the team has been able to do, and so strong in his conviction that he'll be able to win a championship here in South Florida. Embiid, not so much, and no reason to do so, considering everything that's happened, over the course of his career, from his injury that started his NBA career to the drafting of Ben Simmons and the process and everything it's just been a big mess. And they haven't really been able to accomplish much of anything, never been able to get past the second round of the playoffs. And so he should be frustrated. And I know that he wants to win championships, although I'm not so sure how strong he wants to be, because let's be honest, whether it's because of injury or just because he hasn't been particularly good in these moments, like he hasn't done himself any favors in that regard. I know my co-host on Locked On NBA, Matt Moore, said something very similar. You should definitely go check out that episode when we talked about it yesterday. But he hasn't helped himself in that argument. So if you want to win a championship, then lay it all on the line. Like I have no doubt about Jimmy's sincerity in wanting a championship. That maybe he struggled at different points, but considering what I saw in the bubble, considering what I saw against Boston last year when he was on one leg, considering what we saw from him this year in the playoffs on an ankle the size of a grapefruit, like I think that he has shown time and time again how much he wants this and what he's willing to do in order to get it. With Embiid, I'm not so sure. That's pretty much it.
I'll double down on what you just said. If you haven't listened to Locked On NBA, check it out. You guys dedicated a whole segment to this and got much more nuanced and great perspective than we're going to have a chance to do here. But I think what Matt said actually is, and I think it's a good point, that must bum you out if you're a Philadelphia 76ers fan, right? And even if you're going on Twitter and just be like, I was just kidding. I was like, it's almost just like, well, screw you, man. Like, why are you kidding about that?
Absolutely ridiculous.
Yeah,
he's definitely not kidding about it either.
So, David, there was a time where I had my windshield broken, just like as it happens, like a pebble flew into it and whatever.
Yeah.
And I just didn't get it taken care of for a while. So the little crack that could have just been a repair expanded, and I had to get the whole thing replaced. And I went and tried to like change my deductible on the insurance, and then call the insurance company and say that, hey, no, this is the new deductible, so I could get the whole thing covered as opposed to having to come out of pocket with it. And they said, no, you changed your insurance and this time, and your claim was like 3 days before that. Like, nice try, buddy. That's what this was like, early 20s Wes, like thinking that he was smarter than the rest of the world. That's what Joel Embiid was just trying to do. That's basically what Joel Embiid just tried to do with Twitter. He's like, no, man, like I was just kidding. Like, why would you? What's funny? First of all, it's not funny. You're trolling who? Who are you trolling? Like, it doesn't. If you're trolling your own fans, again, it just it must bum you out if you're a fan of his.
Why would you do that? Like,
and he's the guy, man. Like, everybody loves him in Philadelphia. And I do think, and again, you guys made this point on the show, if he keeps saying stuff like this, that Philadelphia fan base, we know it can turn, and it will turn.
And it will
turn on him. And it is starting to. It feels like it. It feels like there's the tide is starting to shift a little bit against him. But obviously, if he were to win a championship in Philadelphia, no harm, no foul. But who knows what happens with him and James Harden and all these things. In terms of whether or not the Miami Heat should get involved, the proposed idea of swapping Bam for Joel Embiid, first of all, I don't think that would be even a real trade. That feels like a trade machine kind of NBA 2K trade that would never happen in real life. I'm also just sort of like, Joel Embiid is one of the best 7 players in the NBA. He's a superstar among superstars. He's awesome. I don't want to make that trade. I don't want to make that trade. Not if they get
You
Damian
don't want to
Lillard.
make that trade?
Not if it's Dame, Jimmy Butler, and Bam Adebayo.
What if it's Dame, Jimmy Butler, and Joel Embiid?
I hear you. I don't want it.
Oh, good. You know how I feel about it. I mean, I no interest in Embiid here. Like, as much fun as he might be to cover and things like that when he drops,
I love him as a player.
Nugget, sense of humor and things of that sort. Yeah, absolutely. But not as a player. I think he's better as a person, to be 100% honest with you, which is strange considering how much I talk about his game.
You and I disagree with him. You're kind of sick about the flopping and
yes.
kind of all that stuff and the
talking.
He falls way too much. He needs to stop falling all the time. I mean, it was wild to see like Jimmy Butler go into the paint and get like Nikola Jokic, who's 300 pounds, falling on his shoulder, and Jimmy Butler barely move off his spot and draw a foul, and then Joel Embiid run into some Marcus Smart or Derek White or something like that and fall over like you just got hit by a truck or something like that. It was like it was ridiculous. I get so yeah. The falling is a little it's over. It's a little bit much, but yeah, I don't know. I just first of all I don't think that would be the deal. I think you have to throw in more if you're the Miami Heat in order to get Joel Embiid.
Absolutely.
And then at that point you're like, okay, like what are the returns that we're really trying to get here, and at what point do they become diminished? Is a worthwhile question to ask. And I find the whole idea of swapping Bam Adebayo for Joel Embiid just completely ludicrous for both sides, by the way, for both sides. I don't think it makes any sense because as great as Bam Adebayo is, he's not going to lead your team in scoring. We know that. Joel Embiid can do that for you, right? Like they're good where they're at. I can't believe that was even proposed.
It'd have to be like Bam Tyler or something like that, plus
that's
all the picks, etc.
Yeah. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Happy birthday to Bam Adebayo, by the way. Make sure to tune in tomorrow when we debate who the biggest stars in Miami sports are. Hit that subscribe button on YouTube. Follow us on your favorite podcast app. David, thanks for joining me.
You got it, Wes.